And now, coming to you live from the City of Angels, Los Angeles, California, it's the Sheena Metal Experience with your host, Sheena Metal, only on KGRA Digital Broadcasting.
Hi, and welcome to the Sheena Metal Experience on KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network. We come to you live every Friday at 3 o'clock Pacific time. I'm Sheena Metal. I'm a psychic medium. I'm an interfaith minister. I'm a 27-year talk radio host, a paranormal survivor, and I come live from my home in Los Angeles, California every week. This show is about spirituality. It's about humanity. It's about creativity. It's about passion. It's about service. It's about thinking outside the box. It's about becoming your best you and inspiring others to do the same in this big, beautiful world. And every week on this show, it may be my show, but it's always your experience. My guest today is a wonderfully talented author and speaker, paranormal investigator and theorist, ufologist, inventor of paranormal gadgets, and one of the coolest people I know in the entire world. Please welcome to the show, the wonderful Barry Fitzgerald is here. How are you, my friend? It's good to have you here.
Sheena, it is absolutely great to see you again. And believe me, it is my pleasure.
It's absolutely a thrill to have you. You're one of my favorite Irishmen, and that's saying a lot because I have a lot of them in my tribe. So, including me. You're one of my favorites.
Thank you very much.
It's wonderful to have you here. And of course, everybody knows you from Ghost Hunters International and from many different shows. I've known you for a long time, interviewed you many times on the radio. But last month, you did one of my new iHeartRadio shows. And I was not aware of how much you've become a part of the ufology community. Because all the times you've done my radio shows, we've always talked about folklore or about spirit, paranormal investigation, ghosts, energies, earth spirits. When did the community and ufology sort of come onto your radar? When did you become a part of that?
I think it's always been there. It's always been connected, to be honest. And of course, writing the book, The Deceptions of Gods and Men, the recent one, it was about exposing this common thread that of commonality that wove its way through many of the fringe research fields, which included ufology. And the fairy realm and legend and folklore, things like that. But from my perspective, my journey through this particular path that I find myself on, which has taken me over 30 years now, has always showed these various different connections, but I never really picked up on them in the early sense. It was later that I began to say, I began to step back and go, wait a minute. Why am I seeing, why is this the same as that, yet that's being called something else? Or that is being identified as something, it's appearing as something else, yet it mixes with us the same way. The phenomena is the same. And from my perspective, I really wanted to delve into this subject matter and really strip away this outer appearance that these things take on, and really delve into that. And whenever we did that, that's whenever we started to expose this conspiracy, if you like, that this phenomena may actually originate from the same place. And I just don't mean within the paranormal. I mean a broad spectrum of what we're interacting with, which deceives us into thinking it's something else. It's something completely different. It's something mundane or a different appearance, may originate from the same source.
So do you believe, and this is probably the final question, and then that's our show. Good night. Do you believe that everything that we think of as paranormal is linked to what we think of as ufology?
Now, here's the problem. You see, when we start using terminology such as the paranormal, cryptids,
Sure.
and ufology, we're already pigeonholing that particular phenomena.
Mm.
So we need to strip that away. The phenomena is not the phenomena is the paranormal phenomena is not does not originate within ufology,
Right.
and the phenomena that appears in ufology in its truest sense, because they're within ufology, it gets very complicated today because of the technology that we're creating. So we have to break that apart. We have to fracture that within stuff with during the study of ufology, so that we can set aside our technology, which is exceptional.
Mm.
But we have to separate that to look at the original phenomena, because many of that still operates today.
Mm.
But the phenomena in which it interacts with us did not originate within ufology, nor did the world of the paranormal, the phenomena that happens there, originate within the paranormal. This
Mm.
is something way beyond that. So we need to strip that identification away, and start tracking this back to its source and see the way that it interacts with us, and also understand the way that it can actually deceive us in the ways that it does, and understand that. And by doing that, and by understanding those traits that it possesses, we can move that phenomena to the side. That illusion that can develop, we can move that away, and really focus on this phenomena in its purest sense. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that all of it is absolutely bad. There are pockets of it within. There are pockets within the phenomena that do show potential as for us to have positive encounters,
Mm.
for us to share information, for us to establish an understanding, on both sides. Because let's face it, when you're working, especially with the human race, you really have to try and find the right person there.
Mm.
And so that all comes into play when dealing with this phenomena. However, there is a huge amount of it where there's a mountain of deception. And that is something we really have to focus on. The book itself it's not about telling people, don't do it, don't get involved. It's more like caution.
Mm.
Understand what you're getting, understand what you're communicating with, and here is how you start to break that down and start to work your way inside, and push behind the curtain.
Absolutely. So do you believe, and I'll ask you this, and then I'll get into that bigger question that you were just
Mm,
talking about. Do you believe within the ufology world
mm.
that there are off-worlders that are actually living, breathing, sentient beings that get in a craft that travels at the speed of light and they come here? Or do you think that what we think of as off-worlders or aliens or extraterrestrials or whatever word you want to use are actually beings that are more like interdimensionals or more like the fairy world, where they're not really biological beings?
Now, whenever we think of otherworlders, I am certainly not saying that there's no such thing as aliens. There's no such thing as life on other planets, and by no means I would be very naive if I was to say that. The
Sure.
universe is
Sure. Yeah.
vast, and I love the idea of life being on other planets. Are they coming here? That's a different thing altogether.
Mm.
And when we start delving into this particular subject matter, we can start seeing that there's a long history here of phenomena that just didn't start in 1947 with the
Of
Project Love.
course. Right.
This goes back way, way, way longer.
Yeah.
And even with
Mhm.
the documentation here that we have in Ireland, we can see that interaction with these beings really stretches back. But the interaction with these beings changes, their
Mm.
appearance changes. But again, like I said at the beginning, the phenomena remains the same. The mask is different, but the phenomena remains the same.
Right.
And
Right.
when we look at this idea of and as you rightly said, do these come from space? I don't believe so. Do these in their truest form? Again, ufology gets complicated because of the technology we create. In its truest form, which they operate, they have been here for a very, very long
Oh,
time. In
absolutely. I
fact,
do believe
more than
that.
likely
Yes.
longer than we have.
Yes.
And that manipulation is something we need to concentrate on. That's something
Yes.
we need to focus on, because that finds its way into all of our lives.
Mm.
Everyone on this planet is going to be touched by this particular phenomena in one way or another.
Right. And that's why I ask you about the biological nature of them, if you believe that there actually are beings that come from other planets that are
Mhm.
biological earthbound
Mhm.
creatures as we are. And the theory that perhaps they seeded us, right? That part of how humanity became humanity was with a little help from our off-world friends.
Mhm.
And that they have sort of an investment in our evolution. Do you believe in that part of the
Oh, yeah,
ufology
well, yes,
world?
they would have a certain investment, because there's something that we brought up in the book. He who has the body wins,
Mm.
and part of that particular, there's an essence of that energy, that um, life beyond the veil
Mm.
that permeates into here and into us. So we're affected by that. But the problem is that when we're born here, we inherit that particular aspect of that energy, if you like, that from the void,
Sure.
and is incorporated within us. But as we get on within the show, there are aspects of the void, the great void, which these things return to at point of death. Sometimes they don't want to go back, and that causes a problem.
Mm.
And sometimes when we open the door during particular investigations within the
Sure.
paranormal, or even opening the door within CE5 communications and things like that, we
Right.
can open the door to allow these things in, and they cannot stay here indefinitely. They have to attach to us,
Mm.
and when they begin to attach to us, the ultimate goal is to get inside, rather than staying on our shoulder or whatever the case may be.
Right.
It's about he who has the body wins.
Well, and that's akin to the ideas of possession, right? I mean, it's the same,
It's
or
yes,
spirit
yes,
attachment. It's
yes.
the same
Again,
kind of
we're looking
idea.
at with a different name,
Right.
but the phenomena remains the same.
Right. Absolutely. It's so for people who don't know, when Barry was talking about C5, that is close encounters of the fifth kind, right? Which is
Yes.
actual communication,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
one-on-one communication, or
Mhm.
many-on-many communication
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
off-worlders. I did a C5 film this summer, documentary, and folks in the C5 community, and talking about a lot of this was the basis of a lot of it. What out in Joshua Tree, right, where there's so much what we
Mhm.
think of as earth spirits, what we think of as Native American energy, what we think of as interdimensionals, what we think of as off-worlders, all in one place. How do you differentiate what is
Yeah.
what? And do you
Yeah.
even care? My mother was, as you know, Barry, because we've had many shows and I discuss her all the
Mhm.
time, but
Mhm.
she was a metaphysician when I was growing up in the 70s, when that word was not used as much as it is now. And
Mhm.
so I was sort of raised that there was basically just two groups, right? There were earthbound beings, and then there was everything else. And
Mhm.
she didn't really get into the boxing of what everything else was. It just was. And
Mhm.
that's what I'm taking out of a lot of what you're saying now, that it's not about well, this is a ghost, and this is a
Mhm.
demon, and this is
Yeah.
a
Yeah. Yeah.
Bigfoot, and this is a UFO. Just the
Mhm.
idea that everything beyond the earthbound plane
Mhm.
is all connected as one um, macrocosmic world,
Yes.
and
Yes.
how you
Mhm.
want to quantify the microcosmic sets in there is
Mhm.
oftentimes just terminology and not an
Yes.
actual differentiation between the things.
And problematic. That in itself can actually help hide the true interaction, when we decide to break it down into its various different forms. And yeah, I know that a lot of folks would have problems. People who have had experiences with
Mm.
UFOs, for instance, um, who may have problems with the idea of, well, I saw these beings, I touched these beings. Now, the idea of them being physical is nothing new, not in the slightest. And when we go and we look and cross-reference what is going on within the seance rooms of old Europe, we find that these beings could also appear in the seance rooms. And in fact, I know of experiments that were happening back in 1995 in the UK, where during the act of seance, these people were appearing, well, parts of the people were appearing, in particular arms, which came up to the elbow, and there was nothing after that.
Yeah.
The idea that they can materialize in the solid form is nothing new. So for them to materialize in the solid, again, is part of that particular illusion. Now, when we start interacting with these things, and when you're targeted specifically, there is a 20-second window. And that's very, very important to understand, the 20-second window. Because when these things initially make contact, you'll get the flashing light in the sky. People will make contact, they use flashlights or lasers or whatever, and these things will flash back at them. That serves to connect to the conscious brain. Because that is the hook. That's the hook that they're waiting for, or sorry, the bait that they're waiting for. And we take it. And our brains are going, what is that? Wow, that's crazy. That's where already the clock is ticking at that particular moment. We should be listening to our instinct, the seat of our intuition. The gift of discernment is within us. We all possess a wonderful gift of discernment, which in modern sense can be turned down. There are various different reasons as to why that is. But when we make contact, that initial 20 seconds speaks volumes of the interaction and to the nature of the phenomena that is coming through. If our fight or flight kicks in which we get the hair going up the back of the necks, that's our system telling us something's not right here.
Oh, yeah.
Now, that is directly connected to this aspect within us which comes from beyond the void. Now, we would identify that as our soul, our shadow. That is our shadow telling us this ain't right. And it manifests that through the physical in which it engages the fight or flight. That's the seat of our instinct. And when that engages, we should be listening to that within the first 20 seconds, because after that, it pushes. It can push the human brain into a theta band rhythm, and that is where the brain starts to go into deep meditation. That's where hypnotic suggestion begins to appear, and that's where this idea of false memory can be planted. So the idea where, for instance, a perfect example is of this observer effect, where three people see the same UFO but all report different things. It's already linked to the conscious brain, and it's manipulating at that stage. We see three different things. It's already past the 20-second stage at that point. So they can let you see what they want you to see. That is a problem.
That's part of the deception that you're talking about.
Part of the deception. Yeah.
Right. So do we ever get the opportunity, or is there a way to quantify what we're actually seeing? I mean, is there a way to, when that starts, to know what the deception is and be able to see through it, whether it's for those 20 seconds or in retrospect with the memory?
Yes, in particular, when the idea of you using technology is going to be very, very difficult, because a lot of this phenomena does not appear when there's cameras. The reason that they do not appear in front of cameras is because the cameras tell you what's really there. Camera cannot be manipulated, but we can. So that is a problem. A lot of the phenomena will not appear with cameras, but if we can get the cameras placed in a way that we can remove that conscious connection that we have with the camera. For instance, I'll give you an example. A friend of a friend comes in and sets up cameras. We know nothing of it. So that friend is notified the other friend that the cameras are in place. Now, that keeps us out of the loop. So therefore, when we go to this particular location, we don't know that the cameras are there. They cannot detect what's already in our brain.
Wow.
So the cameras have the ability to draw information from that. I've had the personal experience of this, where the camera was showing me something which I was not seeing.
Mm.
In fact, I was seeing multiples of what the camera actually picked up on. There was only one, but what I was being shown was two different individuals of different size and color and everything else. And that showed me clearly that they can't lie to the camera, but
Yeah.
they can lie to me.
Mm. What about, and is that the same with audio devices, that however they
No.
sound, or can they deceive that?
Sound can also be manipulated, and,
Okay.
and this is something we experienced recently at a site which is known as the Forest of Lights. It was a place where back in the 1990s, a guy was abducted with his dog out of this particular forest, and he was gone for 4 days. And he reappeared in the middle of the search party looking for him on the fourth day, just like that. And while we were at the location this year, last year, we were hearing the phenomena. Now, in itself, it was not. The audio device was recording, of course, but what we were hearing was something different. Again, that particular manipulation was starting to happen. And what we saw and what we heard is that the manipulation can also work within the audio devices, because when we went back and listened to the audio, both of us recognized that is not what we heard, and both of us heard two different things. So the manipulation can also happen there. And in fact, what we were hearing was very, very, very similar to what would be associated with Bigfoot. Now, this is here in Ireland. So we were hearing a similarity, if you like, of this particular phenomenon. And, when we go back and we look at this common factor that weaves its way through all the different research fields, we find that this similarity, which in itself is used within the courts of law to arrive at decisions within the court of law. So the same particular process, if we take that process and apply it to the world of the paranormal and things like that, we can actually show that there's enough proof here to show that this phenomenon is actually happening. There is something going on here that demands more study. But when we put on our big shoes and we start going into it and want to see this phenomena appearing in the laboratory, that's difficult. It's not impossible, because we already seen in the 1970s that within the Livermore laboratories in the United States, during daylight, that this particular phenomena can appear and interact with the scientists. But the scientists had to stop because they thought they were going to go crazy. Because this stuff, not only was it appearing in the laboratory setting, it also followed them home, which is also something we see in other paranormal sites.
Yes, especially
and follow us home.
Associated with negativity, right? With negative energy, with darkness.
Yeah.
It'll follow you home and come ruin your life.
So we see so there are some instances where this can work within in the laboratory, but again, we have to be of the right mind for that to happen as well. For those experiments to happen, the Skoll experiments in the United Kingdom were another perfect example, where scientists were able to go to the silence rooms and see the phenomena happen. And within that particular within that setting, small UFOs appeared, and these little tiny discs and cylinders were moving around the room. Some even produced their own light down onto the table, and this was all witnessed. But not only that, there was something else that appeared which really spoke volumes and backs up what we were writing about in the Deceptions of Gods and Men, because within the silence room, where you expect to be speaking to Great Aunt Bethy,
right,
a gray alien appeared. What's a gray alien doing in the silence room? So again, same phenomena, different mask.
I have had that happen during spirit board sessions, where it was all well and good, and we were just talking to Grandma, and all of a sudden, this giant thudding presence landed on the roof and took over everything
Yeah.
and started reeling out its opinions on everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very much a different energy, because you
Yeah.
believe, right, that there are spirits that are just spirits, right? You also believe in the spirits of those who've passed, or do you think a lot of it is this?
This is the thing, you see, also within this body, this meat suit is also part of the spirit. So you've got the soul and the spirit. Within today's society, we use soul and spirit, and it's very interchangeable.
Mm-hmm.
Our ancestors never did.
Mm-hmm.
The soul and the spirit were two different aspects of
Right.
which created this trinity. At point of death, at point of death, the spirit is gone. Mm-hmm. It goes back to wherever it has to go, wherever that is. I'm not going to get into that, but a lot of people will call it hell, heaven, Belvedere, the source, whatever the case.
I like home. Yeah.
Yeah. But that part of us is gone. We do not communicate with that anymore. That is gone. But the soul is the aspect that can live on, attached to the body for days, for weeks, and sometimes even for months. And when that detaches, that in itself, if it doesn't reach out and connect to someone else, it has to return to the void. And when it returns to the void, it brings back with it, it brings the knowledge that it experienced back with it to the void, which helps create this illusion of the global consciousness and the Akashic records.
Gotcha.
And that in itself is where they can, within the use of spirit boards and things like that, they've got access, partial access to this information, which can help break us down and reduce our intuition and also our suspicions. And by doing that, we get comfortable with it, and our fight or flight lowers. The skin resistance reduces because we get used to it and we like it, and it bypasses that defense system, that innate defense system that we have, and it goes within the human race. We have this strange thing when dealing with spirit or aliens, whatever the case, whatever form you wish to call them. We have this unusual thing where they'll come in and they'll whisper sweet nothings to us, and give us 3 lies and 1 truth. And for some bizarre reason, we have this innate ability in which we disregard the 3 lies and concentrate on the 1 truth. It's so bizarre how we do this, and time again, and we continue to deal with this being, energy, whatever you want to call it, and it's spouting us all loads of nonsense and running us down that yellow brick road.
Yeah. So the void to you is a different place than the heaven or the home or the universe. So the soul and the spirit go to 2 different places, is what you're saying. And the void is that not a good thing? Because to me, when I hear the void, it doesn't sound amazing to me. It sounds like a strange, disenfranchised purgatory kind of place.
Well, you're pretty much on the mark there, because the void in itself is this idea, and we can see this through other testimonies and experiences people have had, which are listed within the book, in which it's this place of nothing. Literally nothing exists. There's no male, there's no female, there's no light, there's no darkness, there's no yin, there's no yang, nothing. Now, in the book, we initially said that we believe that this originates, part of this that goes to the void originates from us. But since reading the book, I've been really, really knuckling down on this particular idea, and I'm beginning to wonder, because it is identified as dimensional, and it's in a dimension that's close to us.
Okay.
I'm beginning to wonder, what if it didn't originate with us? What if it originated there?
Sure.
And is I suppose hitchhiking on us. So it's just a thought. I don't know, but just looking at the information that's already there, there is this great darkness, this place of nothing on this other side. And experiencers such OBE experiences, out of body experiences, such as Robert Monroe, he spoke of this dark water that he had to cross to get to the other place. And this water, he said, within it, there were beings that were of a lower grade, almost tribal in their ways, but they had independent thought. But to get across the water, you couldn't rush. You had to take it slowly, otherwise you attract attention. And he also warned on the way back from the experiences of the OBE that we have the potential of attracting those things back, which again gets us back to the idea of the paranormal investigating, where we leave the blasted door open, and these things leach through.
Right.
They want back to the world of the light.
Well, and when you're sleeping, right, it's easier to be communicated with when you're sleeping because your guard is down. It's easier for folks who say they've been abducted. It often happens when you're sleeping because that's when you're in your most vulnerable space, right? You don't have your conscious mind awake with that fight or flight to say, no, that doesn't happen. And, it's a vulnerable time for folks who are visited on a regular basis by beings.
It can be very, very difficult. There are techniques, of course, that could be used that can help with that. But again, that's something that we speak about in the book, about how you can take back some control in that particular situation, and the idea of simply, people will wear like myself, for instance, I have this silver Celtic iconography around my neck, but there is something much more powerful, and that it can in itself can be just a small ingot of iron around the neck.
Right.
It's amazing against this particular phenomenon.
Yeah, I wear gold. I wear a thing of charms, right on my solar plexus. And there's everything on there that I resonate with, including a bunch of my different Irish symbols. It's every time someone gets one for me, it's always a very special person and a very special occasion. And I always bless it, have it blessed, and then it stays right here. Because I think your solar plexus chakra is a very vulnerable place. I mean, it's where you get attacked by human people, right? So also spirits people always talk about the heart, but it really is the gut that's the most vulnerable.
And, which is the instinct, of course.
And I find it's wonderful protection. I swim with it on, I shower with it on, I sleep with it on. I never take it off unless I'm in the hospital and someone makes me. And a couple of times at very spiritually charged times in my life, this chain, which you can see is a rope chain, is very thick, has just burst. Charms have gone everywhere. And luckily, I've always been in a place where someone has found every one of them for me. I've only never lost one. But isn't that an interesting thing? And I even have an ash charm with a little bit of my mama in it. Just for a little extra protection from that fierce Irish lady. But it's important that we protect ourselves.
It is.
Not everything in the universe has your best interest at heart. And
that's true.
You have to protect yourself.
Yeah, a lot of people will say that various different lights and everything else they'll call in and do all this. But remember, not all light is good for you. And that's something very important. And it's about finding our balance. Really, that's important within this, and that's something that we saw within the book. It's there is a broken record which is played time and time again to the human race, sometimes twice within a generation, and it's about it's almost like the same coin, but two sides of that particular coin, which one side goes against the other, and the human race is caught in the middle. Now, that story passes itself out time and time again. We even see it in the Bible, the talk of the angels and the demons and things like that. So it's the same story that's told time and time and time again, all the way back to Babylon. Right. But if we can remove ourselves from that, that gives us great power to spot this particular type action that it uses upon us, this influence, this level of deception, is very important. And this idea of iron itself also plays itself out, especially when we consider that this particular type of phenomena can manifest itself, and has done, within the Jewish traditions, which we would recognize as the incubus and succubus, moving forward. And that particular entity migrates into the elfin, which was something that we saw within the Nordic countries, and the Germanic countries.
Sure.
The elves, the fairies. Again, we're back into the fairy traditions, in which iron was exceptionally powerful against them. But when we go back and we look at this idea of the incubus and succubus, 9 out of 10 people who are attacked are women. And they attack when the iron count is low within the woman, especially when they enter their monthly cycle. Many become anemic. That's when they strike.
Right.
And so they wait, and many of them have waited for a long time. So
I always think about that with the legend of the vampire, right? And I think of this specifically in regards to the way that Bram Stoker wrote Dracula. The idea of the vulnerability of having the blood sucked out of you. To me, is very much an analogy for beings living or disembodied that can come and literally suck the chi out of you.
Yeah.
And drain you in the same way, sometimes until you die. So that's really how it was shown to me, in that these particular things, if we start attracting these things, they can operate on that particular level. We have to be aware that they're, absolutely,
in the modern sense, we would call them psychic vampires.
Right.
And Ireland in itself is not new to the whole vampire subject.
Sure.
You had Bram Stoker and Vlad there, but we've had vampire graves here from the 12th century. And in fact, just 10 miles away from where I live here, archaeologists were uncovering back in 2006 a mass grave with 2 vampires on top of it.
Yeah, I think it's so. I when I teach, I always talk about how we know we have a physiological immune system, but we also have an emotional immune system, and we have a spiritual immune system, and the 3 of them kind of play together. I picture them sort of like a triquetra, with the 3 of them, that area in the sweet spot where they intersect is you. So as you protect yourself in the world, you need to protect yourself physically against disease and illness and the elements, but you also need to protect yourself emotionally and spiritually against things that can drain your life force. And that sometimes when you become extremely spiritually and or emotionally drained, it begins to affect your meat suit, right? And you develop physiological illnesses and problems from the spiritual and emotional drainage, right?
I wrote a book back in 2012. It was called The Influence, and it talks about how we can spot these particular energies, and what they're doing to us on a biological level. But when the book was initially being written, I was given this very, very strange and very prophetic insight into the phenomena, in which I was given a warning. And it said, don't become too bright or they see you. And, I thought to myself, whenever I wrote the book, what on earth was that about? But I put it into the book anyway, not fully understanding what it was. Years later, there was a series of experiments that were conducted around the world using electrical voice phenomena, in which you ask a series of questions and it's recorded back onto recording equipment. The same question was being asked time and time again. How do you see us globally? The answer was coming back as light. Then it made sense what I was warned about initially whenever I was reading the book. Don't become too bright or they see you. And this is something that I've spoken to some folks about, that when we do go out, and we have to, there are occasions where we have to take off that shielding we have and just go for it.
Right.
And we use that. But the problem is that a lot of people don't understand that they need to pull that back in again. Use what you got to do, but pull it back in again and make sure you put it off.
Right. because you don't always want to be on the radar of everything.
That's
I remember
right. Yeah.
the year that I became ordained and started working at the church that I work at, and really sort of adopted my spiritual practice as my ministry. Suddenly, this person was after me, and this person had a problem. And I went to a friend of mine who had been a pastor for 20 something years, and I said, "What in the world is going on in my life?"
Yeah.
And he said, "Welcome to starting your ministry. This is what
Mhm.
happens. The minute you," and I always talk about when I teach, right? The more you step into the light, the more the darkness pays attention. So when you suddenly consciously become that person that has devoted your life to positivity and helping and healing, because the universe is sort of the yin yang of light and
Yeah.
dark, right? There's a
Mhm.
pushback from the
Mhm.
darkness
Mhm.
because you're suddenly spreading positivity, and the negativity will push back on you. And sometimes it's in the form of spiritual attack, and sometimes it's in the form of human beings that carry a lot of negativity within them or darkness pushing back on you directly. But there definitely is a pushback. The more you're out there trying to change things and flip it towards the positive,
Yeah.
the more the negativity comes for you. And that quote about don't shine too bright or they'll pay attention makes me think so much about that.
There's something that I was often say as well. Bright lights attract flies.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, in the psychological community, right? When you are trying to get off of the radar of a narcissist, there's a thing called gray rock syndrome. You turn yourself into the gray rock, because if the narcissist doesn't see anything special or anything twinkly, they'll just keep walking and find the next shiny thing. So when you think about it, there's so many things in the spiritual community that are mirrors to things in the psychological community. Is a sociopath evil? Well, maybe sociopath and evil are just two sides of the same coin. That we think of things in such a limiting way, when the truth is there really is only one set of truth, right? It's just what we call those things.
Yes. Very, very much so. I think that in itself, you're pretty much spot on. And I was whenever I was in Brazil, I was introduced to some doctors down there who were doing some wonderful, wonderful work within the state asylums, and they were working with people there that were exceptionally traumatized, but they were putting recording devices in the rooms with them.
Wow.
And they were listening to the voices that were agitating the people in the room who were responding to it. Now, today's society, we're very, very quick about take a pill. That necessarily is not fixing the problem. It's sedating the problem. We didn't consider that there may be something else there. And there is work being carried out in the European mainland, I believe in Denmark, where they're bringing people in and they're helping them through it to communicate with these things and come out the other side drug-free and completely, I suppose, rational.
Yeah.
On the other side of this, instead of being a complete mess and drugged up to the hilt.
Right. I mean, drugs will blanket your gifts, and drugs will blanket your ability to tap into the channel, right? I mean, drugs are a blanket. But unfortunately, they don't just blanket that, they blanket everything.
Yes.
So then you're sort of walking around like a zombie. I always laugh that we have all these movies where we fear the zombie apocalypse, right, Barry? But between incarnate and non-incarnate energies draining us, and then us loading up on drugs and wandering around in a stupor, it really kind of is the zombie apocalypse. I mean, if we're not careful, the zombie apocalypse is coming for us. It just looks a lot different than it does in the movies, right?
Yeah. That's very, very true. And there's a lot to be said in us taking back control. There's a certain amount of people can be troubled and everything else, and it's a horrible, horrible thing to be in. But there's a certain amount of responsibility that they have to accept, that there's some of this that they have allowed to happen. They have given the permission for this to happen, and when the likes of a house, for instance, that has got a lot of trouble in it, and people will go there, and a lot of very talented people, and they will clear the house. if the symbiotic relationship has not been dealt with between the owner of the property and that said energy, then it doesn't matter how many people go in there to clear that. And initial or following that particular clearing, that symbiotic relationship will rear its head, and they will draw it back.
Mm.
That can be a really, really insidious problem, which they have to take responsibility for. That has to be addressed.
Yes. Yes. Very, very true. Yeah, and it's hard because how do we stay sentient and present and connected and not drugged up and zombified,
Mhm.
and at the same time deal with these energies that oftentimes are lying to us, deceiving us, attaching to us, trying
Mhm.
to get inside of us, and not having our best interest at heart. I mean, that really is, I believe, a major spiritual crisis that we're all facing right now.
Oh, we are indeed. Yes, yeah, more so than ever, more so than ever. And I think about the clay tablets there from Babylon, in which they speak about. I'm certainly not recommending this at all, but they speak about people who are troubled and homes that are troubled
Mm-hmm.
by particular demons. So what they did was they called in a bigger demon to take care of that one, and I said,
Right.
maybe that's not a good idea. And but our idea today of demons, of course, originates from mainstream religion and things like that.
Sure.
That
Sure.
idea of demon was a daemon, which was something that originally helped us along in life.
Yeah.
Where now it has been completely bastardized, if you like, and made into something that it wasn't at the beginning.
Right. Well, and I think we as my mama used to say human beings were just smart enough to be dangerous. I think with our little tiny bit of spiritual knowledge right now, we're doing really dumb human things like calling in a bunch of stuff and
Yep.
we don't know what we're calling in, right? We're
Mm.
we're getting the pendulum and calling things in. We're doing a spirit board in our home and calling things in. We're saying, oh, come in me and possess me. I want to know what it feels like. And we're
Yes.
basically saying to these energies that may be negative and not have our best interests at heart, come and do whatever you want with my body, my mind, my soul. That's not smart.
No, no, not at all, not at all. And this is something where we get back to our instinct again, our intuition, the seat of our discernment. There were tests that were done in the laboratory, and there were random photographs that were being shown via computer. So there were pictures of kitty cats and children laughing
Mm-hmm.
and puppy dogs and things like that. As we observed that, our skin resistance lowers. And as the process continued, the computer was selecting completely random photographs.
Hmm.
Our skin resistance lowered. We liked what we saw. We were
Yeah.
communicating with that. That was okay. But suddenly the computer would have picked this image, a horrific image of a car accident. Now, the moment we saw that, our skin resistance rose. Our
Yeah.
body was preparing itself. We need to get ready. Something's not right here. But as the experiment continued, it was noticed that over a period of time, before the computer, not a person, before the computer selected the photograph, our skin resistance began to rise. It was
Hmm.
anticipating what was about to come.
Yeah.
So that speaks volumes as to
Yes.
the abilities of the human body and the
Mm-hmm.
abilities of us as a complete unit. And when we go into a property and we could have four white walls, and we look at it and go, oh yes, this is lovely, this is fantastic. How a real estate property is sold, 75% of it is sold on feeling. What is that feeling? What is that? How do you
Yeah.
explain that? Four white walls, nothing in them. Oh, I like this. This feels nice. Oh
Yes.
no, I don't like this. Something's not right.
Right.
That in itself is our instinct, is
Yeah.
our soul telling us, be aware. There's another
Yes.
show
It's our
here.
spidey senses, right?
Yes.
And we need to pay
Uh-huh.
attention to that. I
Yes.
mean,
We
I
need
know
to
people
listen
that
to
grew up in haunted houses. The one I grew up as a kid, my
that.
mom told me years later, I was in my 30s. She said the minute we walked in that house, I felt millions of arms going, no, no,
Yes.
no, not this
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
She's like, but your father liked it, so I just said okay. But I mean, that's a typical example, right? Of
Yes.
somebody going completely
Absolutely.
against their gut. And realizing, and I think it's the same thing. You hear that story all the time, right? I was drawn to this house. I knew there was something wrong with it, but I bought it anyhow. Or I was drawn to this person and I could tell something was wrong, but I married him anyhow. We need to pay better attention to our
Oh, yes.
senses and better attention to our gut, because those were instilled in us for our basic survival, right? And we need
They
to
were indeed.
implement those things.
And those talents, those abilities, they stem from the soul, which in itself works in our lower instincts. It works in our lower energies. It's not the best of humanity, let's face it. But that in itself is where we get our intuition from.
Yes.
That's where we get our need to feed, our lusts, our wants, our needs, everything is stemming from that.
Yes.
And its job was to keep the body alive as long as possible so that the spirit can exist and experience.
Absolutely true.
You are together, it is a very powerful unit.
Yes, you are so wonderful, my friend. We could talk for 10 hours, but we're totally out of time. Where can people find you online? Where can they find your books? Once again, what is the new book called, and where are you going to be where people can come out and meet you?
The new book is called The Deceptions of Gods and Men, and is available on Amazon in paperback, ebook, and audiobook, which is my favorite. And they can also find more information on my website at charmstealer.com, where there's various different documentaries made there and other books that I have written over the course of my time. And they can also find me on Facebook. I'm also appearing at a huge event in Blackpool on June the 24th, and that'll be the entire weekend. And there's going to be all number of people, high people within the ufology and cryptids and paranormal and everything else. It's going to be a fantastic event. So I'm looking forward to meeting a lot of people there in the UK.
That's wonderful. And will you do this with me again? I would love it.
Absolutely. Anytime, Sheena. I always enjoy it.
Thank you. Always a joy to be here with you. The wonderful Barry Fitzgerald, everybody. Thank you so much, my friend. If you missed any of those links for him or anything that has to do with the show, find me at SheenaMetalSpiritual.com. I'm also everywhere on social media at Sheena Metal. Thank you to KGR Digital Broadcasting for having us here every Friday at 3 o'clock Pacific time. Thank you to my wonderful guest, Barry Fitzgerald. Till I see you next week, seek peace. Live in love, lead with kindness, embrace unity, always work to raise your vibration, and know that you are love and you are loved. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week right here on the Sheena Metal Experience.